Hello, thank you for watching. This is a picture, a satellite view looking down on the western U.S. And it's last year, it's in October 4th of 2023, and it's a pretty fall-looking image. If you look at the colors that are on the screen, if you look at California over here specifically, the state lines aren't here, but we can certainly tell what state this is with the Central Valley here, the Sierra Nevada mountains just to the east. It's brown, it's beige, there's not a lot of green coloring here, and there's also not a lot of snow. There are some clouds in this picture. We can see those over here kind of toward the northeast near Montana and Wyoming. Western Oregon here, some clouds socked in here. Maybe, okay, technically a little bit of snow in the very kind of snow-capped peaks of Mount Shasta and the Cascade volcanoes there, but it's brown, it's beige. That's not an uncommon, image going into the fall year, the beginning of our water year out in the western region. Let's fast forward this. We'll catch us up to now. We'll go to yesterday with the imagery that we had, and you can see all the change that we've had with what's been, at least at this point now at the end of March, a pretty fruitful water year, especially for the western U.S., especially for California, parts of the southern Cascades at time as well, and then the Colorado River Basin as well to the east of the Cascades, fueling the Colorado River. Replenishment here, if you look really closely, in fact, I think, yeah, my mouse is letting me zoom in here. You can see Lake Mead here being replenished, Lake Powell here at the border of Arizona and Utah as well. If we jump over here and look closer at California, look at the color difference. And just, I'll flip back and forth maybe just to make this a little bit more apparent, but you zoom in here, October of last year, really, a few months ago, and then fast forward, look at how lush and green it is. There is the kind of verdant, Mediterranean-esque California that we know and rely on for agriculture and many other things. And then to the east, the stark contrast. You have the green, you quickly go up the high elevations in the Sierras, and you have all the snowpack now above average at this point for the Sierra Nevadas and California as a result of all the blizzards and the snowfall we've talked about really just since kind of the middle of January. We got a little bit, but it was a slow start to the water year. Much of the snowpack we built up in just the last 2 or 3 months here, if not the last month and a half. So huge change. This is the western U.S. This is how it works. We get our water during the water year in the winter. Sometimes it all comes at once, and then we're going to rely on this. It's going into the reservoirs here. If you look closely, you can even see some of those, of course, off to the east here, the Lake Mead one that I just showed you. But zooming in, you can see the San Luis Reservoir, the Sierra Nevadas here along the foothills east of the Central Valley. If you take a zoom out here, you can see other areas that have their snowpack here in the western U.S. The mountains of Idaho, the Salmon River Mountains here, a bit of range up here in western Montana. We have the northern and the southern Cascades. Of course, this area up here, maybe make my cursor more visible, didn't get maybe to where we were hoping for this year, maybe the Yakima Valley here in Washington, but some of the areas in the southern Cascades and southern Idaho doing pretty well. Then the Intermountain West, the Colorado River Basin that we talked about, they're doing very well here as well. So as we go into the snowmelt season now, we get out of the water year, into the snowmelt season, temperatures start to warm up, which could be a little bit further out in the forecast, unfortunately, as I go through this video here. But we will start melting this. We'll get back into the reservoirs. I think we're in a good spot for a lot of folks here if you're south of maybe that line, as far as going into a year where we, could be dealing with all sorts of things that we get in summer. Heat waves, a lack of rainfall, and then we're going to rely on some of the hydrology here to keep us going throughout the summer months. And what could be, again, if you stick around to the end of the video, what could be a La Nina water year next year, depending on how things shake out in the Pacific Ocean. We'll look at all that. We'll look at the forecast here going ahead. I want to jump over here and give you the current satellite view. I was actually able to provide you that nice, neat, pretty green picture of California here because we've finally had some clear weather to allow the satellite to see all the way down to the surface and all the green and snowy colors there that I just showed you. The reason for that is we've had a big upper level ridge. We talked about this last week. These upper level ridges, when they come and dominate the flow here, and what I mean by that, the jet stream going up, over, and around the western coast, that brings in warmer weather. It brings in calmer, clearer conditions. That allows us to see all the way to the ground on the satellite here. And it's that ridging, or that kind of upside down U, or the mountain and the jet stream level flow, whatever you want to call it, that we look for to build in those ridges and bring about that pattern change that we talked about. Unfortunately, and we were kind of, this wasn't maybe clear as we last spoke on Wednesday of last week, it's not going to be a very persistent ridge. In fact, if you kind of look closely here, we can already see some high clouds pushing into western Oregon, parts of Washington, even a little bit of rain now being observed just off the coast, if not right along it in some of the areas in Oregon here. So this is kind of the early indications. We're getting another system in here. You can see some cold air coming down on the back side of it. And we'll have some things to talk about in terms of the forecast going forward. Just kind of a different view of what we were just looking at. That we kind of saw the visible satellite. We could kind of make out where that jet stream level winds were flowing. But right now, there's that upper level ridge over the western U.S. And if you look to the south, the subtropical jet stream, we look for that, in these El Nino years, and we're still in an El Nino. Right? We're going to be talking about transitioning out of that into a La Nina, but we're still in an El Nino. There's still a lot of warmth in the central Pacific Ocean, and that's what fuels that subtropical jet stream. It's what's helped us to get a pretty good water year across many areas in the western U.S., and it's doing its job. We can see a very extended and strengthened Pacific jet stream here, kind of pointed from Hawaii, more at kind of Cabo or the Baja California Peninsula. But over the next 3, 4, 5 days, that's going to be shifting and coming up closer to our neck of the woods, at least for folks in southern and central California, bringing about a change in the forecast. And unfortunately, bringing about a change in this upper level ridge pattern that's kept us having a pretty good week here. If we look at daytime high temperature anomalies, this is just for Wednesday here, March 20th. These are color-coded relative to average, and you can see here, the big story here with that upper level ridge kind of positioned right over the western U.S. as we have warm temperatures to contend with across Idaho, parts of eastern Oregon, eastern Washington, only now just coming down here Wednesday where those clouds are moving into the northwestern coastline. But California, parts of Arizona, dealing with some seasonally warm temperatures here in the end of March. One thing we talked about at the end of last week, and I think this is related to that re-strengthening of the subtropical jet stream, the Madden-Julian oscillation. This has been coming around the maritime continent over in the eastern hemisphere. It has crossed into the Pacific just here over the last few days. It's quickly moving through the Pacific into the western and then eastern Pacific here through the forecast. This is really occurring over the next few days. We watched these earlier in the water year when we had these kind of Pacific transitions from west to east of the Madden-Julian oscillation that tended to strengthen the subtropical jet stream at times, that focused right on California or Oregon or Southern California, brought flooding and things of that nature. Because of this transition, we were kind of curious if we'd see another one of those maybe re-strengthenings, a return to inclement weather here as we went through the end of the work week here. And that seems to be the case going forward, at least right now, looking at some of these forecasts. Let's take the jet stream level winds. We just looked at those, and to just kind of reorient us, here is Hawaii. There's those jet stream level winds from the subtropical, or that southern branch of the jet stream pointed at the Baja California Peninsula. That's down here. Keep an eye on that as I play this forward. We have an upper level trough just here, maybe northeast of Hawaii, and then there, it's hard to see, but that is the upper level ridge, bringing all these warm temperatures in here to the western U.S. I'm going to play this forward, this forecast now from the ECMWF model, through Wednesday evening into Thursday, and then ultimately into Friday morning. And you can see things are changing quickly. One, that subtropical jet stream that we were talking about is getting much stronger. That's that transition from the MJO from the western Pacific to the eastern Pacific, adding that extra instability throughout the Pacific, increasing the strength of those jet stream level winds. And this upper level trough now starting to push in and more dominate the pattern, at least for the immediate west coast as we go through the day on Friday. This would be a big kind of pattern change to what we've been dealing with, I think, over the last 4 to 5 days. Play this forecast forward, you can see that jet stream level winds now coming all the way across California, upper level trough now rather than a ridge, dominating the pattern here over the western U.S., at least over Oregon, parts of central and northern California, Nevada, Idaho, Washington, as we go through the weekend. Taking this out into Monday and Tuesday of next week, now we have this jet stream extended across the Pacific, really kind of pointed at the Pacific Northwest, still focused on parts of northern California. It is trying to maybe form something of an upper level ridge here, but just given the focus and that coming right over the area, I think it's going to be short-lived if anything, and we can see that quickly returning on Wednesday to now an upper level trough re-entering itself over California, likely bringing more inclement weather at some point in the middle of next week. What does this all mean? Well, it means things are going to be changing quickly here as we go through the day Friday in just a few days here, and then I think through the weekend we're going to have some inclement weather, rain, snowfall in the upper elevations to talk about. And then it looks like we might have a very brief respite, right, as that ridge tries to retake over the area. But then something coming through here, likely midweek, getting a little bit further out into the forecast here, right? This is a 7-day forecast, but looking at likely some sort of system coming through the western U.S. as we go through the work week next week. Let's just play that forecast forward in terms of the precipitation intensity and type here. Same forecast that we were looking at now, looking down closer to the conditions at the surface. So this is from the ECMWF. I'll take this through Thursday morning here, ultimately into Friday morning. This is March 22nd, and you can see the first kind of rain bands here, really kind of pushing on shore in northwest California, parts of western coast of Oregon and Washington. As I play this through Friday night, this really starts to come on shore in earnest into parts of the Willamette Valley, western Washington, the SeaTac area, pushing into the Central Valley at times, at least the Sacramento Valley. Snow beginning in the upper elevations near the Sierra Nevada area, and this is getting into early Saturday morning as this pushes through the area through the day on Saturday, finally getting through the Intermountain West as we go through the day on Sunday, bringing snow to some of these areas here, and bringing cooler temperatures across the board to the western U.S. as this all passes through. So you go through the day Monday and Tuesday, remember that upper level jet stream here, those are flowing just like this here as they kind of try to form a ridge here that's keeping some showers in the area here for the Willamette Valley early in the week next week, so kind of the beginning of the work week next week, lesser so to the south as that upper level ridge tries to kind of position over this area. But if you remember that forecast, it's brief. I mean, it doesn't really set up into this big kind of stalled out pattern like we've had over the last week. And here comes that next system associated with the upper level trough that we just talked about sometime midweek next week. This, at least as forecast now on this model run here, could be a pretty significant snowstorm for the Sierra Nevadas. Not as strong maybe as we've seen kind of earlier in this year, but certainly for late March would be significant and notable. This is just one model run, and we're at least 7 days out on this forecast. So this is not something we're going to take verbatim or as gospel, whatever you want to say. But it is there in this model run, and we've seen it somewhat consistently. So likely middle of the week next week, Wednesday, maybe early Thursday, looking at another weather maker coming through, a potentially kind of a late bonus to the snowpack, but I'm not necessarily sure how wanted this is in terms of agriculture and getting some work done in the fields at this point here in spring. But at least in terms of that snowpack, we'll take an extra bonus amount for some of these areas, given what we might contend with here over the next year or two. I showed this earlier. This is the temperature anomalies today on Wednesday. I figured I'd play this forward to give you a sense of where those temperatures are going out into the next 7-day forecast. So we go into Thursday, still kind of hanging around those warm temperatures across the region wide. We have that next system coming in really Friday evening, so that's when we're expecting those temperatures to start to come down along the northwest area. You can see those really kind of starting to impact northwest California where the clouds and the rains move in. Ultimately Saturday, quite a bit colder across California, parts of California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, parts of northwest Montana, much colder here as that system and the cold front associated with it start to come through. Sunday, colder across the board now all the way through the state of Arizona and the southern parts of California, and then much colder Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week as we have that more inclement weather pushing through. The good news here, despite those colder anomalies I just showed you, now we're just looking at those overnight lows through the next 7 days. And if I play this forward and you look closely at some areas like the Central Valley of California in the 40s on Sunday morning, 50s in Southern California at times in parts of Arizona, getting into kind of the mid 40s here in Southern Arizona, again, mid to low 40s here on Monday morning, March 25th. If I play this all the way out into Tuesday of next week, not seeing right now freezing or frost concerns yet, despite the colder temperatures here. I think that's the good news. We've been in colder patterns at times in March here at the end of February, but we haven't quite gotten down to that freezing or frost temperature range, I should say. We'll keep an eye on that as we go through the forecast here. Some unfortunate hints of long-range cold to stick around with potentially in April. So we're not out of the woods yet. We've certainly seen, unfortunately, late freezes or frosts in years past. So we'll keep an eye on this going forward, but at least right now over the next maybe 5 to 7 days, not seeing an immediate risk for concern. Of course, there's always the chance that this can kind of drop quickly, kind of in a 24 or 48 hour lead up to an event. And that's always worth keeping an eye on. Not seeing it, at least right now. Jump over and look at the snowfall forecast. This is through Tuesday, really kind of the end of Monday next week, so through March 25th. The system coming through this weekend, not the biggest snowmaker, but potentially additions of around a foot here for the Sierra Nevadas, maybe a little bit more in some of the higher elevations. Parts of the Cascades getting additional snowfall. This isn't really what I'd call, a significant snowfall event, but it will add to snow totals here late in the water year. Some additional amounts getting up into the northern Rockies as well. These might be a little more welcomed, just given some of the deficits that we've seen next year. I kind of intentionally started this on Tuesday because I didn't necessarily want to include right away the projected snowfall amounts coming through midweek. That system, being 7 to 8 days out in the forecast, not something concrete in terms of where exactly, which areas or which mountain ranges will get the most rain or snow. But I'll play it forward anyway. At least I started with, I think, the more rational position here. But if I take this into March, I should say, Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday of next week, you can see those snowfall amounts really increasing across the board in the Cascades, going from what was maybe a foot now into 2 feet plus, potentially multiple feet. And this is a total, right, from the beginning of the forecast all the way out through next week. But this would be a more significant addition if we include that potential system that at least appears likely. Just the details on it aren't clear yet. Rainfall through that kind of into Monday next week look here. We do see rain coming through the Willamette Valley, as you'd expect. Some of this in the Cascades. These heavier amounts will be falling as ice in terms of snowfall. Northwest California, as it often does, seeing the highest totals here, at least in terms of rainfall on the western coast here. Seeing some, rainfall totals here in the Sacramento Valley. Not the most extreme, rainfall event we've seen this year, certainly for California. Maybe getting up toward a half inch at times in Southern California and parts of the California coastline here. Not seeing, significant appreciable amounts here in the Central Valley. But, maybe pushing up to a third to a half of an inch at times under some of the heavier showers here as we go through the weekend. If you look way out into the forecast, trying to take a picture of where we might be at the end of next week, and unfortunately I see here kind of a similar pattern that we saw maybe closer to the beginning of March here at the end of February as well. If you look north of Hawaii, that's way over here in kind of the bottom left corner of this map. North of Hawaii, at least in this forecast here from the ECMWF ensemble, way out toward the next weekend. So this is March 30th, it's almost into the beginning of April here. We see that big upper level ridge returning north of Hawaii. This was a very persistent feature kind of at the end of February and early March. When we have this big upper level ridge here north of Hawaii, what goes up in the atmosphere and in the jet stream tends to come down. So we have the ridge here, and that tends to come down into a trough over the western U.S. That's a pattern that keeps around some rain chances for the western U.S., but it keeps around those colder temperatures as well. Keeps around cloudiness as well. So suppressed GDD development, less warmth getting into the area, not as friendly for pollination, and maybe not as good conditions for getting out into the fields. So this isn't the best forecast, I think, going out into the end of March, maybe early April. We also see that subtropical jet stream shifted well to the south. Again, that is a familiar look to what we saw at times again in early March, right at the end of February as well. So if we jump over and look at the same forecast for precipitation anomalies through April 2nd, these are 5-day rolling windows here. So really kind of the end of March and then into the very beginning of April. With that trough settling in over the west, we'll see some rainfall chances potentially moving into the western U.S. region, parts of the Willamette Valley, Northern California. Not necessarily the biggest, rainfall signal with these kind of upper level troughs moving over like this. It's not one of these big Pacific jet extensions that's going to give you some big, huge flooding risks, but it's enough to kind of wash things out or keep things kind of dreary, cloudy, cold, and really just not the best thing you want forecast at the end of March and early April. But nonetheless, it's what we're seeing now in that long-range forecast. And there's those temperatures over that same time period. Again, late March, early April, colder than average. Of course, this would return the risk of frost and freeze. We've seen cold temperatures this year without those frost and freeze risk materializing. This just keeps that risk around. It's not saying we're definitely going to hit, 29 degrees in Vidalia here in the early April area, but that risk is there. Frost is very much kind of something that can come about very quickly, kind of in the morning hours. So we'll have to keep an eye on it as we go through the end of March and early April. And just to get a different opinion here, this is from the GFS ensemble over that same time period, end of March, early April. And they're also showing that kind of cold risk, right? So more troughing over the western U.S. region, and an agreement there between the ECMWF and the GFS of that kind of same pattern, that north of Hawaii ridge, the trough over the western U.S., bringing about those colder temperatures and cloud and rain chances. If you look at the 6 to 10 day outlook, this is more for the next work week here from the Climate Prediction Center. Cooler conditions now trying to dominate over the western U.S. with the trough coming in that we talked about, and then that potential midweek system as well. If you look at the precipitation over that same time period, this is consistent with what we saw with that precipitation forecast. Increased precip here over Northwest California, Southern Oregon. They have a bit of an above average anomaly, more so over the Sacramento Valley here, so keeping an eye on that for increased precipitation here going through the middle to end of next work week, consistent with the system coming through, similar to what we saw on the ECMWF. If we take that forecast a little bit further out here from the Climate Prediction Center, this now through that time period that we just talked about where we had the ridge north of Hawaii, perhaps keeping southern Alaska warmer, what goes up comes down. So as that ridge kind of imports itself over the North Pacific, comes down into a trough of the western U.S., we would expect cooler temperatures over the western U.S. The Climate Prediction Center here having below average temperature chances as a result of that. So they're in agreement as well with the models that we just looked at. So increasing the confidence that this pattern comes to fruition. And if we look at their 8 to 14 day precipitation outlook, with something of a trough going like this, we'd see increased precipitation chances for really much of the western U.S. with clouds, shower chances, snowfall chances in the upper elevations of the mountains, but not the biggest kind of rainmaker snowfall event potential, just given that it's not one of these big Pacific jet extension. That's more kind of something we're kind of maybe seeing this weekend. It's not delivering maybe in the same way as what we typically get in the heart of a water year, just because we're getting into the kind of end of the spring and into the water year pattern. But nonetheless, the kind of forecast here and the confidence is clear that looking at some sort of pattern shift toward colder, frequent rainfall, snowfall in the upper elevations, and generally, not your favorite spring weather as we go into early April here. If we look long term at the ECMWF extended forecast, this takes us all the way through April now in terms of precipitation anomalies. They're showing a drier shift here for the Pacific Northwest, potentially the Sierra Nevadas as well. Not the rainiest forecast you're going to get here, so not, I think, bad news. The concern here, though, as we kind of look closely at this, the pattern that might kind of do something like this would maybe be more of something like a trough here over the Intermountain West. And if we look over at the temperature field here from that same extended forecast, rather than the precipitation, unfortunately we see those cold temperature risks continuing through the month of April. I will say, if you kind of look into this a little bit, it has those colder temperatures more biased toward the beginning of the month, so the beginning of April. That's consistent with the forecast that we just put together here with colder temperatures to start the month, but perhaps this is a signal here that we might get a warm up as we go toward the end of April here. We also have some warm temperatures here just off the coast of California and Oregon, so that's not going to hurt in terms of getting some warm temperatures, at least back toward more coastal areas. That is unlike where we went through spring last year, where temperatures were very, very cold here off the west coast of the U.S., and that kept temperatures down. It kept the May gray in full force for coastal areas of California and Oregon at times, I think maybe even impacting the temperature forecast a little bit further inland. So not a bad thing that we kind of have that background state of the warmer temperatures here off the west coast. We'll see if that helps us to warm up a little bit quicker in April as we get out of, hopefully not a forecast, but maybe we'll get out of that warm temperature or the cold temperature regime that we're flipping back into in the forecast here. Speaking of cold temperatures here, not air temperatures, but water temperatures, these are the latest forecasts from a number of different model runs here that forecast sea surface temperatures in the Pacific Ocean. And we look at these to try to figure out where El Nino might be going. And I think the agreement here from just about all these models is that El Nino will be weakening as we go into summer here. So these are all the months now in the forecast. So April, May, June, July, August. And the consensus here is that this kind of La Nina demarcation line here is that at some point here in late summer, we could be looking at the beginnings of a La Nina. Officially in the Pacific. It could happen a little bit later, maybe out toward the end of summer into fall. This goes all the way out to October, November, December. And the question then becomes, is this going to be a strong La Nina? Is it going to persist persistently through the water year such that it gives us maybe a typical La Nina water year? Of course, no La Nina or El Nino is the same. Going into this last water year, 23 and 24, we noticed El Nino was developing slower than what the forecasts, slower than that forecast consensus, slower than we thought. Frankly. And I think that impacted the forecast as we went through the water year. It helped, I think, us start late. El Nino took its time to develop. It ended up peaking in December, maybe early January. And that's when we eventually got a lot of that kind of maybe more typical El Nino-like pattern. And that's when we got the snowfall and the rainfall. So any kind of deviations from the consensus of the forecast could change kind of the material look of that La Nina that we're going to see next water year. And I do have to mention there are some of these model runs that have sea surface temperatures kind of bottoming out, maybe just below this kind of 0 degree anomaly or the 0 degree average here. Maybe not even getting us all the way into La Nina. So this isn't set in stone as a forecast right now. We are in a La Nina watch from the Climate Prediction Center. I would say there's better than 50% chance that we will be in a La Nina at some point to end the year. The question then becomes, is it going to become strong? Is it going to be a more typical La Nina? What are those sea surface temperatures doing just off the coast of California and some other areas that might help determine the personality or the individual character nature of this next La Nina event? But I at least wanted to show you the kind of consensus here from these models that we could be dealing with, all the impacts of a La Nina in a water year. That would be less rainfall and snowfall for California or southern Arizona or the Colorado River Basin. All the more reason that, we needed the rain and the snowfall to build up those snowpacks to get California as green as it was, right, as I showed you at the beginning of this video. So we'll talk about all that as we get to it. Just want to take one final look here before I wrap up at those sea surface temperatures, where we're talking about in terms of those warm temperatures or colder ocean temperatures. The Central Tropical Pacific is right here. And if you look within the Central Tropical Pacific, all those waters are warm. There is your El Nino. So we're still in El Nino. In fact, if you look across the Pacific, you couldn't define it as anything other than warm or kind of La Nina concern, or our eyes right now are way over in the eastern Pacific where it tends to develop. And you can see, and we've seen these over the last few weeks, these little eddies of cold water as they kind of race here across the eastern to western, from the east to the west across the eastern Pacific, I should say. This could be the beginning of that La Nina event, and is likely spelling the end of our El Nino event as well. So I would expect as we go through the end of March into April and May, we'll see this become a little bit more robust, and we'll see these ocean temperatures here weaken. Perhaps, I should say cool, perhaps in concert with that, could see some cooling of the ocean temperatures here in the eastern Pacific. That's the PDO, typically kind of correlated with El Nino and La Nina. When this gets colder, we tend to see a cooling of these waters here, and the degree with which these cool with respect to how this cools, and vice versa, can end up affecting the type of La Nina we had. We actually, if you kind of go back to the end of last year, you'll hear us talking about, was this year going to be, a year where we had a lot of warmth in this kind of PDO region? Because we saw, maybe in 2015 and 16 with that super El Nino, super warm down here along the equator, but we were super warm just off the coast of California. We think that likely impacted the kind of hit and miss nature of that El Nino year. Ended up not getting a lot of the typical effects of El Nino. So the water temperatures here can sometimes matter just as much as what's going on here. So we'll keep an eye on all this throughout the year. I'm curious to see how these two things develop in concert as we go through the summer here, which is likely and often to be a pretty quiet pattern here across the western U.S. One thing I can say that we certainly dealt with at the end of last year that I don't think we're going to see again, if the water temperatures here and here are colder, we are going to see a much more suppressed hurricane season here in the eastern Pacific. Very unlikely that we'd see another Hillary, and a lot of the big storms that we saw through here miss Hawaii at times, some of the remnants hitting and causing some big issues at times as well. So this area here, if we do flip into the La Nina, likely to have less hurricane activity. The kind of corollary there is that over here in the Atlantic, again, not the western U.S. Concern immediately, but we tend to have bigger years here over in the Atlantic when we flip to a La Nina here. So a lot of things to keep an eye on as we go through summer and then into early fall. We'll talk about it here. And till next week, thank you all for watching.